They said my dog was dangerous, that he didn't belong in a quiet neighborhood like ours, but what they didn't know was that the dog they were trying to take away wasn't just any dog. He was a certified police K9, and more than that, he was the reason I was still alive. It started on a rainy Thursday afternoon, the kind where the sky feels heavy and even silence carries weight. I was standing by the window watching Max, my German shepherd, chase raindrops on the porch. He'd been restless all day, packing near the door, ears twitching at every sound. Something about that day felt off, like a storm brewing but not the kind you can see. Then I heard the knock, sharp, impatient, 3 times. When I opened the door, 2 people stood there, a woman with a clipboard and a man wearing a cheap suit and a fake smile. The woman spoke first. "Mr. Turner, we're from the Maplewood Homeowners Association. We've received several complaints about your dog, aggressive barking, disturbing the peace." I frowned. Aggressive? He's never hurt anyone. The man chuckled softly. "Sir, that's not what your neighbors are saying." Max appeared behind me, tail down, watching them carefully. His stance wasn't aggressive, just alert. The woman stepped back slightly. "See, this is exactly what we're talking about." I sighed, rubbing the back of my neck. He's a retired police K9. He's trained to protect. If he barked, he had a reason. But they didn't care. To them, Max was just another dog, loud, big, and inconvenient. They handed me a notice. "You have 7 days to remove the animal from the property or face legal action." I stood there frozen as rain began to fall harder. They turned and left, the woman's umbrella flapping in the wind. Max pressed his head against my leg, sensing my tension. I knelt beside him. "Don't worry, buddy, no one's taking you away." But deep down I wasn't so sure. The next few days were tense. The HOA members kept circling the block, pretending to check mailboxes or trim hedges. Max didn't like them. Every time one walked by, he'd stand near the fence, silent but watchful. His instincts were sharp, he could sense something I couldn't. Then, on the third night around 2 a.m., Max started growling. Not barking, just a deep, low growl that made my skin crawl. I got up, grabbed a flashlight, and followed him to the back door. His ears were pricked forward, his body rigid. "Max, what is it?" He looked at me, then at the yard. I shined the light outside. Nothing, just rain-soaked grass and the old oak tree, but Max refused to move. That's when I saw it. A shadow, quick, human-shaped, darted behind the shed. My heart raced. I grabbed the phone, ready to call the police, but before I could, Max pushed through the dog door and ran into the darkness. "Max," I shouted, slipping on wet tiles as I ran after him. The night air was cold and sharp. I heard a scuffle near the fence, then a scream. When I reached the yard, Max had pinned a man to the ground, teeth bared but not biting. The man was holding a crowbar. "What the hell?" I yelled. The man's face was covered with a hoodie. He tried to push Max off, but Max didn't budge. I called 911, my hands trembling. Within minutes, flashing lights filled the street. The officers who arrived recognized Max instantly. "That's Max from the K9 unit," one said, surprised. "Yeah," I replied, "he's retired, lives with me now." The intruder was taken away. He turned out to be a wanted thief who'd been breaking into homes across the neighborhood. Max had caught him before he could even pry open my window. I thought that would change things, that the HOA would realize how wrong they were. But the next morning I found another notice taped to my door. "Due to the disturbance caused by your dog and last night's police activity, the HOA has decided to proceed with immediate removal action." I couldn't believe it. I stormed down to the association office, Max walking beside me. Inside, the same woman sat at the desk, sipping coffee like she had all the time in the world. "You can't be serious," I said, slamming the notice on her desk. "That disturbance was my dog saving lives." She raised an eyebrow. "Mr. Turner, regardless of circumstances, your animal's behavior caused panic. Several residents called to complain." "Panic?" I laughed bitterly. "He stopped a criminal." She didn't flinch. "Rules are rules." That phrase, "rules are rules," burned in my mind for days. I spent the rest of the week calling lawyers, animal rights groups, even the local police department. Everyone said the same thing: the HOA had limited authority, but they could make my life hell. And they did. They fined me for unauthorized fencing modifications. They claimed Max's collar didn't meet neighborhood noise compliance. every day a new letter arrived. Max could sense my stress. He'd rest his head on my lap, eyes full of understanding. He was the only family I had left. Then one evening, I got a call from Officer Ray, Max's former handler. "Turner, I heard what's happening. I'm coming over." When he arrived, Max's entire demeanor changed. His tail wagged and his eyes lit up for the first time in weeks. Ray knelt and rubbed Max's neck. "Hey, old boy, you still remember me, huh?" I offered him coffee, and we sat at the kitchen table. "Listen," Ray said, lowering his voice. "You should know something. The HOA president, her brother, was one of the suspects Max helped put away years ago. She never got over it. She's got a personal grudge." I froze. "Are you serious?" He nodded. "I can't prove it yet, but I've seen this before. They'll push until you break." My heart sank. This wasn't about noise or fences, it was revenge. That night I couldn't sleep. I watched Max lying on the floor, his chest rising and falling, calm and loyal as always. He'd given everything to protect people like her, and this was his reward. The next day, things escalated. When I came home from work, my gate was open and Max was gone. His leash lay snapped near the porch. My stomach dropped. I searched the entire block, calling his name until my voice cracked. Nothing. Then I noticed a small note taped to the mailbox. It read, "You should have listened. Consider this your warning." My knees nearly gave out. I ran to the HOA office, but it was closed. No one answered calls. I went to the police, filed a report, begged them to track his microchip. They promised to do what they could. Hours turned into days. I barely ate. Every time I heard a bark in the distance, my heart leapt, but it was never him. Then on the fourth day, around midnight, my phone buzzed, an unknown number. A man's voice came through, calm and cold. "If you want your dog back, stop fighting the HOA, sign the removal papers tomorrow. No police, no questions." My blood went cold. "Who are you? What have you done to him?" The call disconnected. I sat there in the dark, gripping the phone so tightly it hurt. Max, my best friend, my protector, was being held hostage. I knew the risk, but I couldn't just sign him away. I had to find him. The next morning, I called Ray again, told him everything. He didn't hesitate. "Don't worry, we'll get him back." He contacted some of his old colleagues from the K-9 division. Within hours, we had a small team of off-duty officers who'd all worked with Max before. They remembered what he'd done, how many lives he'd saved. We started investigating quietly. Ray found something strange. The HOA president, Mrs. Collins, had recently purchased an old warehouse property on the edge of town. No business license, no listed purpose. Something didn't add up. That night we drove there, me, Ray, and two others. The warehouse was dark except for a faint light inside. My heart pounded as we approached. Through a crack in the metal door I saw him, Max, chained, shivering. Rage and relief hit me all at once. But before we could move, we heard footsteps and a voice. "Make sure he's ready for transport in the morning. The shelter's paying extra for purebreds." It was Mrs. Collins. Ray looked at me, eyes wide. "She's selling him." I wanted to burst in right then, but Ray stopped me. "We need proof, cameras, witnesses." He was right. We called for backup quietly, and within minutes 2 squad cars rolled up, lights off. They surrounded the building. But before anyone could act, the back door slammed open. Someone had spotted us. Mrs. Collins ran out, yelling, "You have no authority here. He's a dangerous animal." Ray held up his badge. "You're under arrest for theft and animal cruelty." Chaos erupted. Officers rushed in and I sprinted toward Max. His tail thumped weakly as I unchained him. "It's okay, buddy, you're safe now." But before I could lead him out, a loud crash echoed behind us. A shelf toppled over, blocking the exit. Flames flickered. Someone had set the place on fire. Smoke filled the room fast. Max barked, pulling at my sleeve, guiding me toward a broken window. I climbed out first, then helped him through. We stumbled onto the cold ground, coughing just as fire trucks arrived. Mrs. Collins was screaming as she was handcuffed, shouting things about dangerous dogs and revenge. Max leaned against me, trembling but alive. The officers checked him and one smiled. "Still a hero, huh, Max?" Ray put a hand on my shoulder. "You did good, Turner, he's safe now." But as I looked at the burning building, I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't over. Because when Mrs. Collins was led away, she turned to me with a twisted smile. "This isn't finished," she hissed. "You'll regret this." And deep down I knew she meant it. That night I couldn't sleep. Every sound outside made me flinch. Every car that slowed near my house made my pulse race. Even Max, exhausted, patched up, and finally asleep beside my bed, couldn't calm the storm inside me. Mrs. Collins was in custody, but I knew people like her didn't stay there long, not with the money and connections she had. The next morning, my fears came true. The news headline read, "HOA president released on bail claims retaliation by former police K9 owner." Retaliation, that word stung. Somehow she'd flipped the story, made herself the victim. The neighborhood turned cold overnight. People stopped waving. Kids crossed the street when they saw Max. Even the mailman avoided our gate. Someone spray-painted "dangerous animal" on my fence. I was sitting on the porch staring at the graffiti when Ray pulled up in his cruiser. He got out holding 2 coffees. "You look like you haven't slept in days." I forced a smile because I haven't. He sighed. "Listen, Turner, Collins is dangerous. She's not just obsessed with control, she's connected to something bigger." I frowned. "What do you mean?" Ray leaned closer. "Remember the thief Max caught that night? The one who broke into your yard? Turns out he used to work security for Collins' brother before he was arrested. I think they were planning something and Max got in the way." The pieces started to click together in my mind like jagged glass. The break-in, the threats, the kidnapping, none of it was random. "She's trying to erase every trace of what Max did," I muttered, "to protect her family's name." Ray nodded. "Exactly, and if she can't do it legally, she'll do it her way." Before he left, he looked back and said something that chilled me. "Keep your doors locked, and whatever happens, don't let Max out of your sight." I did exactly that. For the next few days, I barely left the house. Max stayed close, quiet but vigilant. Every time a car passed, his ears twitched. His instincts had saved my life before. I trusted them more than my own. Then on the 5th night, it happened again. A loud thud outside, then another. I rushed to the window. A black SUV was parked near the curb, no plates. 2 figures stood by the fence, dressed in dark clothes. One held what looked like a tranquilizer gun. Before I could react, Max barked loud, fierce, the kind of bark that echoes through your bones. The men froze. One raised his weapon, but Max was faster. He leapt through the open window like lightning. I shouted his name, but it was too late. He tackled the first man to the ground, teeth sinking into the tranquilizer gun instead of flesh. The second man ran toward the SUV, yelling, "Abort! Abort!" The engine roared and they sped off, leaving skid marks on the pavement. I ran to Max, who was panting but unharmed. I grabbed the gun from the ground. It was marked with a label, "Property of Maplewood Security Division." That's when I knew Mrs. Collins wasn't acting alone. She had her own private security team working for her. The police came again, took statements, collected evidence. But by morning, all the cameras on my street had been mysteriously wiped clean. No footage, no proof. When I called Ray, he sounded angry but cautious. "They're covering tracks. We can't touch her until we have something solid." I clenched my fists. "Then I'll find it myself." For days, I followed every lead I could. I searched property records, business registrations, old news reports. Collins had ties to a private animal transport company, one that relocated aggressive dogs for neighborhood associations. But what they were really doing was selling trained dogs to underground buyers. Max wasn't her first target, he was just the most valuable one. I knew I needed proof, so I did something risky. I sent an anonymous message to the company's listed email, pretending to be a buyer. I said I was looking for a trained German Shepherd, preferably with prior service experience. They replied within an hour, "Meet at the old Maple Ridge compound tomorrow night, cash only, no questions." My hands shook as I read it. They didn't even try to hide. That night, I didn't tell Ray. I couldn't risk him stopping me. I packed my phone, a flashlight, and a small recorder. Max followed me to the door, tail wagging slightly as if he knew what I was about to do. "Not this time, buddy," I whispered. "I can't risk losing you again." He whined softly. It broke my heart. I drove alone to the compound, an abandoned factory just outside town. Rusted gates, broken windows, no lights. I parked a few blocks away and walked the rest of the way, heart hammering. Inside, I heard voices. 3 men stood near a truck arguing about payment. Crates lined the walls, and inside some I could hear whimpers, dogs. I pressed record and crept closer. One man was holding paperwork. "This next one's special," he said. "Former K9, perfect obedience, worth at least 20 grand. Another laughed. The one from Maplewood thought that Mutt got rescued. The first man smirked. "Not for long, she wants him gone permanently." The words hit me like a knife. My boots scraped against gravel. They turned instantly. "Hey, who's there?" I bolted, sprinting toward the back exit. Footsteps thundered behind me. I reached the door, locked. Then suddenly, a familiar bark split the air. "Max!" He came charging through the broken fence, teeth bared, eyes blazing with fury. He lunged at the men chasing me, forcing them to stumble back. I didn't even have time to think about how he'd found me. All I knew was he'd come for me. Together we ran. The men shouted after us, but we didn't stop until we reached the car. I started the engine, hands shaking, and we sped off into the night. When I looked at Max, covered in dust but alive, I couldn't help but laugh in disbelief. "You never listen, do you?" He barked once, as if to say, "I wasn't about to let you go alone." We made it home just before dawn. I immediately sent the recording to Ray with one line, "Now we have proof." He called back within minutes. "Turner, you don't know what you just did. That place, under federal watch, you might have just blown the lid off an entire ring." He promised to handle it from there. For the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of hope. But that hope didn't last long. Around noon, a black car pulled up outside. 2 men in suits stepped out, not police, not HOA. One handed me an envelope. "Mr. Turner, this is a formal notice. You and your animal are to vacate Maplewood immediately. Failure to comply will result in forced removal." I looked at the paper. It wasn't from the HOA. It was from Maplewood Holdings LLC, a shell company owned by none other than Mrs. Collins. She was trying to drive me out entirely. That evening, I saw her standing across the street, watching. Her lips curved into that same cold smile. "You think you've won," she called out. "You have no idea what you've started." I clenched my fists, but Max stood between us, growling softly. She turned and walked away, her heels clicking on the pavement, leaving me with one haunting thought echoing in my head. If she couldn't take my dog away, she was going to destroy everything else I had. After that night, I realized something deep inside me had changed. Fear wasn't the same anymore. It wasn't panic or trembling in the dark. It was quiet now, heavier, like a storm that doesn't roar but keeps building behind the clouds. Every morning, I checked the windows first. Every noise, every passing car, every shadow made me wonder if they'd come back. But through it all, Max never left my side. He slept near the front door every night, guarding it like it was his duty, like he was back on the force again. Ray visited often, but his expression grew darker each time. "Turner," he said one evening, "the recording you gave me started something big. The feds are involved now. That animal relocation business, it's part of a trafficking operation. They've been smuggling dogs trained for illegal security and underground fighting. Collins' name is all over their financials." I felt both relief and dread. Then they'll finally arrest her, right? Ray hesitated. "Eventually, but she's smart. She's already wiped her name off most documents. She's moving fast, and she knows you're the reason the case blew open." I looked down at Max, resting his chin on my shoe. "Then she'll come for me." He didn't deny it. That night, I packed an emergency bag just in case. Max watched me, silent but alert. He always knew when danger was close. I left the lights off and stayed awake by the window until dawn. At 3:47 a.m. I heard it, a faint click outside like metal against glass. I froze, then another sound, footsteps near the side door. Before I could move, Max was already up. He growled low, the kind of growl that vibrates through the floor. I grabbed my phone and dialed Ray's number, whispering, "They're here." Then came the crash. The back door splintered open. 3 men in dark tactical gear stormed in, silent, professional. They weren't burglars, they were here for something specific. Or someone. Max launched himself at the first intruder before I could even blink. His teeth caught the man's arm, dragging him down. The others shouted, one raising a weapon, not a gun but a stun stick. I ducked behind the couch as electricity crackled through the air. "Max!" I shouted, but he didn't back down. The second man swung, missing him by inches. Max lunged again, biting the weapon clean out of his hand. The third man rushed forward, but then red and blue lights exploded outside. Police sirens. The men panicked. They scrambled toward the exit, dragging their wounded partner. By the time the officers stormed in, the intruders were gone. Only broken glass and the smell of ozone filled the air. Ray burst in seconds later. "You okay?" I nodded, breathless. They were professionals, Ray, not random thugs. He examined the stun stick left behind. "Military grade, this isn't just Collins anymore." That's when we both realized this went beyond one vengeful woman. Ray's team secured the house, set up cameras, extra patrols, but he kept saying something that worried me. If they sent a team like that, it's because they need to silence you before the feds trace the money. And the next morning, my fears came true. The story hit the news. Local HOA president found dead in her car, suspected suicide. But Ray didn't believe it, neither did I. "She knew too much," he said grimly. "They silenced her before she could talk." That should have been the end, the enemy gone, the secret buried, but instead the pressure only grew. Every file, every account connected to Collins started disappearing. The feds investigating the animal ring reported multiple data wipes, leaks, and accidents. And then there was me, the only civilian still holding a recording of their operation. That made me a target. I decided to leave Maplewood. I couldn't risk Max anymore. We packed everything we could into the truck, food, clothes, documents, and planned to head north to my cousin's cabin. But as I started the engine, I saw something in the rearview mirror. A black SUV parked 2 houses down, same model as before, no plates. Ray had warned me to call if anything happened, so I did, but before he could pick up, my phone lost signal. Total blackout. I looked at Max, his fur stood up, his eyes locked on the SUV. "You feel it too, huh?" I whispered. Then the SUV's headlights flared on. I floored the gas, tires screeched as we tore down the street. The SUV followed instantly. We raced through the dark, empty roads, the city shrinking behind us. Every turn I took, they matched. Every speed I pushed, they pushed harder. Max barked furiously, packing between the seats as if urging me not to stop. Then out of nowhere, another car appeared ahead, blocking the road. I slammed the brakes, the truck spun sideways, tires screaming. The SUV behind us stopped too, boxing us in. 2 men stepped out, same black uniforms, same silence. I reached for my glove compartment, but before I could grab anything, the driver's door yanked open. A gun pressed against my temple. "Out of the car," one of them ordered. Max snarled. "Call him off," the man hissed, "or we'll." Before he could finish, Max lunged straight at him. The impact sent the man stumbling backward, gun flying from his hand. The second man swung at Max, but I kicked the door into him, knocking him off balance. We both scrambled out, running into the nearby woods. Bullets cracked through branches behind us, but Max stayed in front, guiding me, shielding me. We ran until the sound of engines faded, until the only noise was our breathing and the whisper of wind through trees. I collapsed on the cold ground, gasping. Max sat beside me, eyes scanning the dark, always watching, always protecting. When dawn came, we found an old ranger cabin, empty, dusty, but safe. I turned on my backup phone and finally got through to Ray. "Turner," he said, his voice shaking, "they're not local. They're part of an international network. Collins was laundering their money through the HOA. The feds are raiding their warehouses as we speak, but you need to stay off-grid for now." I looked at Max, who was lying by the window, staring out into the fog. "We'll be fine," I said quietly. "We've been through worse." But deep down I knew it wasn't over, not yet. Because the next morning someone slipped an envelope under the cabin door. No footprints, no sound. Inside was a single photo, me and Max, taken from somewhere outside the window. And on the back in black ink was one sentence. "You can't hide forever." I dropped the photo, my hands trembling. Max stood up, growling at the door. And that's when I realized the real fight was just beginning. The forest was silent that morning, too silent. Even the birds seemed to stay away as if they knew something was watching. I sat there, staring at that photo, my mind spinning. Someone had been close enough to take that picture and quiet enough to leave it without a trace. Max paced near the door, every muscle tense. His ears twitched at every sound. I crouched beside him, whispering, "Easy, boy, we've been through worse." But even as I said it, I didn't believe it. My phone buzzed an encrypted message from Ray. "Stay put, federal agents are en route, do not asterisk move." That should have made me feel safe, but somehow it didn't. Hours passed. The wind picked up, brushing the cabin walls. I tried to keep my mind occupied, but paranoia gnawed at me. Every rustle outside made me reach for the old revolver I'd brought. Then, just before sunset, Max froze. His body stiffened, ears pricked toward the woods. "What is it?" I whispered. He growled low, then looked at me, that same look he used to give during his K9 days, the look that meant one thing: they're here. I moved to the window. At first I saw nothing. Then from the trees, shapes began to emerge, men in black tactical gear just like before. But this time there were more of them. My heart pounded. There was no way out. The back door led into a ravine. We were surrounded. Max barked once, sharp and loud like a warning shot. Then the men moved. Glass shattered. A flash grenade rolled through the window. I threw my arm up, but the light was blinding. My ears rang as I stumbled back. Through the haze, I saw them rushing in. And then Max moved. He charged straight into the smoke, teeth flashing, his growl cutting through the ringing in my ears. I heard shouting, one man yelling, another falling. I grabbed the revolver, fired once into the ceiling, enough to scatter them. We dove for the back door, breaking through it with our shoulders. I didn't stop running until my legs burned. Branches whipped against my face, but I didn't care. Max ran beside me, keeping pace. Behind us, I heard the shouts fading. They weren't chasing anymore, which meant they didn't have to. They planted something. When we reached the ridge, I turned and saw smoke rising from the cabin. Then, a deep, echoing blast ripped through the valley. The cabin was gone. If we'd stayed another minute. I swallowed hard, clutching Max's collar. "They were never coming to arrest us," I whispered. "They came to erase us." We wandered for hours before finding an old highway. I flagged down a trucker who agreed to drop us at the next town. As we rode, I noticed something strange, a drone hovering high above, following us for miles before disappearing. By the time we reached the small diner off Route 9, I was exhausted. I found a corner booth, ordered water, and checked my phone. It was dead, not out of battery, but wiped, completely blank. Whoever these people were, they had reached far beyond what I imagined. Then, out of nowhere, someone slid into the seat across from me. A woman, late 30s, sharp eyes. She wore no uniform, but her presence screamed authority. "Mr. Turner," she said softly, "my name is Agent Claire Hayes, Federal Bureau of Investigation." I froze. She held up a badge, real, polished, official. "You've been hard to find. We've been tracking this operation for over a year. Collins was one of our undercover assets. Her death wasn't planned." I frowned. "Assets, you mean?" "She was feeding us intel on a group smuggling trained dogs, but she went rogue, started taking bribes. When you recorded that deal, you exposed not just her, but every name on the payroll." I leaned back, my head spinning. "So they're after me because I know too much." "Exactly," she said. "You have something they want, the original K9 certification for Max. It links him to a case file that disappeared years ago." I blinked. "What are you talking about?" She glanced at Max. He wasn't just any K9, he was part of Project Sentinel, a classified task unit for detecting biochemical weapons. When the project was shut down, every dog was ordered to be euthanized, except one. My throat went dry. "You mean Max?" She nodded slowly. "Someone faked his death record, someone wanted him alive." My hands trembled. I looked at Max, his calm, steady eyes staring back at me. How many times had I wondered what he'd been through before I adopted him? How many scars had I ignored, thinking they were just from training? "What happens now?" I asked quietly. Agent Hayes looked conflicted. They'll keep coming until they have him. If he falls into the wrong hands, every operation tied to Sentinel could be compromised. You and Max need to disappear completely, new names, new lives. Before I could answer, a gunshot shattered the diner window. People screamed. I ducked under the table as Hayes drew her weapon, shouting down. Through the chaos, I saw the drone again, hovering outside. It fired another round, hitting the wall behind us. Hayes grabbed my arm. Back exit, go. We ran through the kitchen, bursting out into the alley. Max stayed close, barking furiously at the sky. Hayes fired at the drone, 2 precise shots, and it spiraled down in flames. Cars this way, she said, sprinting toward a black SUV parked behind the dumpster. We jumped in and she floored the gas. As we sped away, she said, we'll take you to a safe house up north. No digital trace, no cell signal. I stared at the road ahead, the sun dipping below the horizon. Will we ever be free of them? Hayes didn't answer, she just tightened her grip on the wheel. Hours passed in silence. The city lights vanished, replaced by endless forest. Max finally relaxed, curling up beside me. I rested a hand on his fur, feeling the rhythm of his breathing. But just as I began to drift off, Hayes whispered, "They're behind us." Headlights appeared in the mirror, too close, too fast. "Hold on," she muttered, swerving off the main road. The SUV bounced onto a dirt path, branches scratching against the windows. I clutched Max, heart pounding. How did they find us? Hayes shook her head. They shouldn't have been able to, unless, she looked at me, unless someone inside leaked our route. We sped through the darkness, the other car gaining fast. And then, boom, a blinding light erupted behind us. The explosion tore through the trees, flipping their car end over end. Hayes slammed the brakes. When the dust cleared, I saw figures climbing from the wreckage, and behind them, a second vehicle, black and unmarked, pulling up slowly. Hayes whispered, "That's not them, that's someone else." The door opened and a man stepped out, tall, calm, wearing a federal badge. But when he spoke, it wasn't to her, it was to me. "Mr. Turner," he said, voice smooth and cold, "you've been protecting government property. Hand over the dog and you can go free." I looked down at Max. He stood between us, growling softly. The man smiled faintly. "I wouldn't do that, son, you're in over your head." But for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel fear, only resolve. I straightened, maybe, but this dog saved my life and I'm not letting him go. The man's smile faded. He raised his hand. "Then you've made your choice." Hayes pulled her gun. The man did the same. The air grew heavy, still, like the world was holding its breath. And that's when the first shot rang out.